Welcome back. It's a pivotal moment in diplomacy. 20 months in the making. Iran and 6 major world powers finally have an agreement on Iran's disputed nuclear program. Christiane Amanpour sat down with 2 of the key players. She asked Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javid Zarif why the deal is good for Iran. He said that any agreement includes compromise, but Iran does receive significant benefits. She also spoke to US Secretary of State John Kerry when asked if he'd made history. He could only say it's a possibility. Secretary Kerry also pushed back against those who say striking a deal was a bad idea.
Sanctions brought them to the table to negotiate. They did the very thing everybody put the sanctions in place to get them to do, which is negotiate. So they negotiated. Now measure the agreement to see whether or not it achieves what we need to in terms of insight, restraint, accountability, and so forth. That's what we should be doing.
But we wanted to change the nature of our relationship with the West. We didn't believe that was good for Iran and the West, while we have common threats and common challenges in our region, to be basically entrenching ourselves in a non-issue, in an unnecessary crisis, in a fabricated crisis that has been created for over the past almost a decade or more.
Meanwhile, Israel says the world is making a historic mistake. It's been warning for months against this deal and is furious. The warnings apparently fell on deaf ears. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will do what it has to defend itself from any threat.
The world is a much more dangerous place today than it was yesterday. The leading international powers have bet our collective future on a deal with the foremost sponsor of international terrorism. They've gambled that in 10 years' time, Iran's terrorist regime will change while removing any incentive for it to do so. In fact, the deal gives Iran every incentive not to change.
Let's get some perspective on the deal now and what it might accomplish. For that, I want to bring in Vali Nasr in Washington. He's the Dean of the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University. Thanks very much for being with us. Firstly, Iran stands to gain a lot from this deal, doesn't it? This could be potentially a financial windfall.
Well, not so quickly. Iran is not likely to see much financial benefit for at least 6 months, 6 to 12 months. And after that, it all depends on how things progress. There's also a risk factor that either Congress or the next president of the United States may walk away from the deal. So I don't think it's a financial bonanza anytime soon for Iran. It will be better than the sanctions regime that they're under, but the benefits will come down the road only after Iran has implemented the deal and has significantly changed.
Sure, but once the sanctions are lifted and this deal goes through, it could stand to make $150 billion, some are saying.
That's correct. But all of that is contingent on verification, and none of it would actually come through for a significant amount of time. And in exchange for that, Iran has to go through everything that it has agreed to in the deal.
What do you say to the critics from Saudi Arabia, Israel, even the Republicans here in the US, who worry that this could lead to a nuclear arms race?
I don't think so. I think every country has to make a decision about whether or not they need nuclear weapons. And if they decide to go down that path, if Saudi Arabia, for instance, wants to get nuclear weapons, it has to deal with a sanctions regime that could be imposed on it by the United Nations, by the United States. It would have to deal with all the costs and issues that comes with making that sort of an investment. I think at this point in time, this is largely a talking point in order to argue against this deal. And in any ways, I think it's more likely these countries would have pursued a nuclear program if Iran actually was not bound by a treaty and was free to build a bomb tomorrow.
How do you think this is going to change the relationships, particularly the US relationship with Iran? Obviously, it's been a very tense relationship for a very long time.
I think that's the unknown here, because I think in Iran you have 2 groups. You have the hardliners and the supreme leader who see this deal as a narrow arms control deal and nothing more than that. And they're willing to abide by it so long as it's a narrow arms control deal. And then you have the president, the foreign minister, the large number of middle-class Iranians who want this deal to be beginning of an integration into the world and into the global economy. And now which one of these visions wins in Iran is going to be very interesting to watch in the next year.
What do you think this will mean for President Obama's legacy? Obviously, he's had great success in the last few months here in the US, pushing through a lot of reform here. But on an international stage, what do you think this will say about his legacy?
I think the most important legacy is that he's ascertained that diplomacy works, and diplomacy should be put back at the heart of American foreign policy. That we obviously have military might and we should use it when necessary, but that a lot of problems and a lot of critical issues around the world should be addressed by diplomacy. And I think the fact that he was able to break the ice with a country with which the United States had had absolutely no relations and an adversarial relation for 37 years, and get Iran to actually sign the very first document with the United States in 37 years, really means that diplomacy is in fact potentially his biggest legacy.
Absolutely, a very good point. Vali Nasr, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Well, you're watching CNN Newscenter. Coming up, Mexico puts up a reward for the capture of El Chapo. We'll have the latest on the drug lord's prison escape and how authorities are trying to find him.